Hello and welcome. Today we're talking about Nova Drift, a game that is 3 years old now and has gotten a ton of updates, and actually just now I realized it is early access. And you know how I feel about early access, as in I don't want to play those because then you get bored before the game comes out, like actually finishes, and sometimes early access games can just be pure bad and then they just get abandoned, etc, etc. But this game, and to be 100% transparent here, I have gotten the game as a gift or free key through a website from the developers, and that was back in, wait, let me check. That was back in, So that was back in March 2020, 1 year after the release, and I already had a ton of fun back then, came back after maybe a year again, and now I played it again today with the Enemy 2.0 update. It's just goddamn good, it's just fun, and apparently the full release should be late 2020, so this video is a little bit like before the full release, which is a little bit weird, so I don't know what the full release will be. I hope that don't change a lot and just maybe add to it or just do things, because we have seen some games that completely shift from their original design in the past, like 2 updates before they released, and you're like, why would you do that? Either way, the game how it is right now, how you can buy it, is incredible. So gameplay wise, it is just craziness later on. It's similar to Risk of Rain 2, how I would compare it. So if you look at Risk of Rain 2 gameplay at like minute 1, and then you're just 1 hour in, it's like, what the fuck is happening? That's similar to how I experienced right now my last match in Nova Drift that I have recorded, so you can maybe see later on how absolutely insane it gets. Not only on the visual side, like all the things that are happening, but also the variety of enemies, and the enemies then suddenly, oh, I saw this enemy before, whoops, it suddenly has 4 little guys next to it. Well, it protects it a little bit from the side, and I'm like, oh, for Christ's sake, guys, leave. Beside that, it also has a ton of builds, and you're like, wait, builds in an actual roguelike? Like, what is happening? So I can only compare it really to Path of Exile, and I think I'm confusing you. So let me break it down. So you start the game with a base spaceship that has different effects, abilities, and things. All right, good. Then you choose your shield, which is your defensive option. There are a variety of shields. I think there are maybe 6, 8, 9. I think 8 or 9. And then you have your weapon, which can also be from shotgun blasts to sniper shots to, or maybe you just want to shoot a ton of projectiles everywhere and just fill the screen with stuff, or maybe some sort of like little black hole vortex electricity. There are a ton of things. And yes, for the Path of Exile viewers right now, there is a Righteous Fire build. Yes, you can have a fire aura that deals damage. Yes. Path of Exile players hearing Righteous Fire, they're like, let's go! So you may realize now why this gives me PoE feeling, or like a little bit of a taste of it, because of just a ton of builds you can make, from the weapons to the ship to the shield to the upgrades afterwards, right? Because while you're playing, you're leveling up, and each level up gives you an upgrade, and you can then choose from a 1, 2, 3, a variety of stuff. And you can also, with a certain ship that I use in the recording, you can banish things. So you can say, okay, I like the mines thing, that I can just drop mines, but that doesn't work for my build. And you can just banish the mod, and if you banish the 1 core mod, like the beginning, and as you can see on the right side there's a tree, you can just banish it all, because everything is gone. Because if you don't get the beginning, the first start, you can't get the other things. So you're just completely removed. With 1 button, you removed 4 potential mods in the future, just giving you a higher chance to get the things you want, right? And I feel like that's quite important, because it is very RNG heavy, because sometimes you just don't get the things you need. And that way you can just really force it, or at least have a higher chance to get the things you want, and then you just blast the screen. On top of the huge variety of builds that you can play and try out, and it probably takes you an hour or more each build, and good lord, there's a lot of content already here, and it's early access. And by the way, these builds were back in 2 years, like they were there, right? So anyways, you also got challenge modes that I then play a little bit later in the recording, that just I think you start in a wave 12 instead of wave 1. Enemies, I think, are a little bit more aggressive. I think they usually have maybe a variety of extra additions. I think some of them spawn as a rare enemy. I think maybe bigger, stronger, faster, stuff like this. I'm not exactly sure, but it definitely feels like you're speeding up the game's difficulty by ×4 or something. So if you're like snoozing, well, there are challenge modes, just activate them. And at some point, I think I only played the challenge mode because I think you also get more XP and everything, and just everything feels a little bit faster and snappier. It's just super interesting. But for the beginning, maybe don't jump into the challenge modes. You also got a leaderboard, so if you want to compare yourself to other players. And on top of all that, there's also a community and even community pages where you can look up build guides. Yes, there are build guides for this indie game that released 3 years ago and still is early access. It's an incredibly active community, and you can just be like, okay, let me just find a build, because I can't think of builds, right? Similar to how I play PoE, I'm just Pepega. So I just look up some builds. And yeah, you can just look up some builds, and it literally exactly says what you need to get, when and where, sometimes maybe even. It's so good. You probably realize I like the gameplay now. Gameplay is just solid. It's so bloody good. Now, part of gameplay is also controlled. So how does it control? I have to say, it definitely takes some time to get into it, like in terms of moving around and dodging and things. But if you have some problems with that on keyboard and mouse, and the gameplay you see right now is played on keyboard and mouse, try a controller. And if you also can't really play with the controller, then I highly recommend maybe going for the increased thrust upgrade, because it just feels a lot better. Also, you can maybe play different spaceships that have more thrust than the other ones, so maybe it feels a lot better, right? Because in some games, if your character feels so slow, it feels really bad, and you think it's just overall a bad game, but actually you can just play a different character or class that is a little bit faster, and you're like, oh yeah, this works. Oh yeah, this is nice. Either way, experiment with that. Definitely give it some time. It probably will take you maybe like 30 minutes to really get the hang of it, unless you're just, an absolute god gamer, giga chad. What do the Zoomers say? Amogus. Oh, jeez Christ. All right, let's time to cleanse ourselves with the beautiful visuals in this game. It's clean, it's clear, you exactly see what's happening. The background is also very nice, but it doesn't take away from what is happening in the front. And it's just overall very high quality. Nothing looks out of place. Everything has just the same art style, in my opinion, and it just works. I like it. I can't say anything. I mean, you look at the screen right now. Do you like the visuals? Good. Music. Actually, I barely notice it. I maybe it's just me being super focused in the game, or maybe I think I have my music maybe turned down a little bit too much, and the sound effects are just much louder and just overpower the music, but it definitely wasn't bad. I just didn't really notice it. So maybe they could do a little bit more there, or maybe I'm just a Pepega. But moving to sounds now. Sound is great. Like, it's just super punchy. Everything just sounds dangerous. That should sound dangerous. I like the charge up sound of certain enemies. You're like, oh god, something's happening. And actually, I fought 2 bosses in this recording I have never fought in my ever before, because they, I think, recently came out like maybe a month or so with the Enemies 2.0 update. And dude, the goddamn beetle boss, I'm like, are you serious? All right, moving past that, the last important topic, story. Omega law. There is no story. It's a pure, it's a game, right? There is no story. Just play the game, enjoy it, have fun, experiment, and yeah, just realize how you suddenly spend 6 hours on a Sunday and you're like, Jesus Christ. That's my brief review or thoughts on Nova Drift. An incredibly good game. I love how it's overwhelmingly positive on Steam. It definitely deserves it. The quality's here. They're active with their updates. They're active with their posts. They keep you up to date. The gameplay is there. The variety is there. The content is there. And you can definitely play this game for I think it's like 13 bucks. You can definitely play this game for 13 hours. That's usually how I see, you know, like euro or price to hour game, hour played comparison. Either way, highly recommend buying it if you enjoy this type of game, you know, top-down space and shooter. And on top of that, just having a ton of builds and just experimenting, you know. I mean, at the end of the day, you're probably gonna just play Righteous Fire, aren't you? You're just gonna burn enemies to a crisp, and you just stand there and just hover next to the enemy. Disgusting. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I wish you a great rest of your weekend, or week whenever you watch this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.